Hi, this is Billy Brown. I'm a nature writer with Grid Magazine here in Philadelphia, as well as phillynature.org. And we're talking about spring ephemeral wildflowers. So spring is here in Philadelphia. The temperatures are starting to warm up, even though today it's kind of a windy, chilly day. But we've got birds coming back we haven't seen for months. We got a lot of flowers coming up. And when you think about the flowers that are popping up in spring, you might first think of things that you plant in your garden, like tulips or daffodils. But in our woodlands, we have some native wildflowers that also pop up in the spring and are here for a fleeting period of time and are a lot of fun to check out. And they generally get referred to as spring ephemerals. So if you're a plant growing on the forest floor, you might not think of it immediately, but one of your biggest challenges is getting light. The trees hog all the light, right? They grow out their branches in the canopy, they put out leaves, and they try to catch as much of the light as they can so that if you're on the forest floor, you just don't get very much of it. So various plants have ended up evolving so that they can do a lot of their life history or a lot of their business before the trees get all their leaves out, which is something called leafing out, right? So right now I'm looking at a whole bunch of Virginia bluebell. And so Virginia bluebell are one of these plants that early in the spring, they put up their leaves, they get their flowers up, they get pollinated, and they can do all of that work before the canopy closes up and the light goes away. And so we've got a bunch of different kinds of spring ephemerals. We're right now at the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education on their wildflower loop, where they do a really good job of protecting, of planting, of tending these spring ephemeral wildflowers. So it's a great place to check them out if you want to see them in the flesh or in the flower. And so we've got a few species we've been seeing today. We've seen some rue anemone, we've seen phlox, we've seen red trillium, we've seen star chickweed, we've seen various violets, some spring beauties, and here we got these Virginia bluebells. So here we're looking at some red trillium. There's a few different kinds of trillium. These are one of the classic spring ephemeral wildflowers. Now, when you see a beautiful flower like this, you might be very naturally tempted to pick it. Definitely don't pick it. Spring ephemerals, some of them like trilliums, when you think of what they do, they sort of store up all their energy for this one flower, the one flower they're going to do all year. And so you're taking away their chance to be fertilized and fruit and seed and put out seed and that kind of thing. And also enough years of them getting picked or even eaten by deer or anything like that will sort of deplete their energy and can kill the individual plants. So when you see beautiful spring ephemeral wildflowers like this out in the woods, take your pictures, take a good look at them, enjoy them, but please don't pick them and take them home. Spring ephemerals can be frustratingly hard to find in Philadelphia. It might not look like it at first, but basically a lot of our forests are a mess, especially if you compare them to the way they would have looked before European agriculture showed up on the scene. So you got to think back to the 1600s. Since then, we've had hundreds of years of forests getting logged and growing back and getting farmed and turned into pasture and then growing back again. We got our river valleys and our creek valleys getting used for industry with mills and things like that. And so the forests that we have today are really survivors. They've been bouncing back over and over again. And in the process, a few things have happened. So we've introduced a lot of plants that weren't here originally. We have introduced earthworms, and you might not think of those as being exotic, but our area really didn't have very many, if any, native earthworms. And so the ones that you find under logs in the woods or in your garden are imports. And so one of the things that earthworms do is they eat decaying plant matter. And so these earthworms, especially the big night crawlers, what they do is they sort of plow through the leaf litter. And so plants that evolved with a thicker layer of leaf litter don't have it anymore. Soil washes away a lot faster, and that's bad for a lot of these understory plants like the ones we're looking at right now. Another problem we have is white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer are native. We love them. They're a treasured part of our Philadelphia fauna. But in Philadelphia, we have a ton of deer. You could say we have a lot more than the forests can support, or at least that are healthy for other things that live in the forest. So white-tailed deer eat the plants that they evolved with, largely. And so they like to eat these spring ephemeral wildflowers, various species of them. They don't necessarily like to eat some of the exotic imports like garlic mustard, which we've also seen a lot of today. So what happens is the deer will eat a lot of the plants that they do like, They don't eat so much of the garlic mustard, and the garlic mustard, as well as other things like lesser celandine, which is a little buttercup that you see in forests. Plants like that can take over and crowd out a lot of our native plants that are really getting hammered by those deer. So when you come to a place like the wildflower loop here, this is a place where they've really been carefully tending to these wildflowers. Other places you might find them are on steep slopes in the woods or rocky slopes that weren't very good for agriculture, and so they might not have actually been plowed under very much. And so those have relatively intact soil, not so many earthworms. You might find more wildflowers in spots like that. So you might be wondering, what are the kinds of things you can do to support spring ephemeral wildflowers and plants in the understories of our forests? One thing is support organizations that are tending to good habitat like this. You can even plant some of them in your garden. I'd say go to a plant sale. The Schuylkill Center has plant sales. Bartram's Garden has plant sales. Good Host Plants, Redbud Nursery. We got some really great places to buy native plants in the Philly area, and they sell a lot of these plants that you can put in your garden. Again, don't dig them up out of the woods. A lot of these plants have very long life cycles. They'll live for even decades and grow very slowly. And so if they get picked, if they get dug out of the soil, that's a real setback for the local population. So definitely buy them from a good source if you want to plant them in your garden. As for worms, the worm's kind of out of the bag in Philadelphia, but especially if you're going fishing in other places in the state and you've got like some night crawlers left over, take them home with you. Don't dump them on the ground to end up in the soil and possibly start messing up the soil somewhere else too. So we want to thank the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education for letting us film here. Come check them out. It's a great place to see wildflowers and a lot of other nature here in Philadelphia. This has been a production of phillynature.org and Grid, so please check out phillynature.org for more information about nature in Philadelphia. And if you like this kind of content, please leave us a donation. And please subscribe to Grid Magazine and support environmental journalism right here in Philadelphia. Thanks.